Sayın Osman İlgen'e teşekkür ediyoruz. Konferansımızın ilk konuşması sürdürülebilir inovasyon başlığını taşıyor. Sunumlarını yapmak üzere BMGI Avrupa Genel Müdürü Sayın Greg Kinsey ile BMGI Türkiye Genel Müdürü Sayın Tevfik Durmuşoğlu'nu sahneye davet ediyorum.
Değerli konuklar, hoş geldiniz. İsmim Tevfik Durmuşoğlu, BMGI Türkiye'nin genel müdürüyüm. Bu sunumu BMGI Avrupa Operasyonu'nun genel müdürü Sayın Greg Kinsey ile birlikte yapmayı planladık. Sunum sırasında inovasyonun temel unsurları ve kilit elementleri hakkında bilgi vereceğiz ve dünyada söz konusu kavramla ilgili yaptığımız uygulamalarla ilgili deneyimlerimizi sizlerle paylaşmaya çalışacağız. Size kapsama başlamadan önce kısaca BMGI hakkında bilgi vermek isterim. BMGI'nin faaliyet alanları çok genel anlamda süreç mükemmelliği, inovasyon ve problem çözümü olarak özetlenebilir. 15 ülkede çok sayıda ofisimiz ve 20'nin üzerinde ülkede aktif müşterimiz var. Müşterilerin, biraz sonra bahsedeceğimiz kavramlarla ilgili birlikte çalışmakta olduğumuz müşterilerden bazılarını burada görebilirsiniz. Şimdi konuklarımız arasında ki katılımcıların büyük çoğunluğunun inşaat sektöründen olduğunu tahmin ediyorum. Ama aslında az sonra bahsedeceğimiz kavram biraz sektör üzeri bir kavram. İnovasyonun içinde çokça esinlenme ve iyi uygulamaları uyarlama var. Esinlenme ve iyi uygulamalardan iyi uygulamaları uyarlama deyince bunlar sizin inovasyonunuz için yeni fikirlerin tetik noktaları olabilir ve bu fikirler sadece kendi sektörünüzden değil çok farklı yerlerden gelebilir aslında. Bu yüzden şirketlerin inovasyon konusunda ülkelerindeki ve dünyadaki gelişmeleri takip ederken biraz daha sektörüstü ve genel bir bakış açısıyla konuya yaklaşmaları gerektiğinin önemli olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Başlayabiliriz Greg.
Thank you, Tevfik. So, I heard in the introduction that maybe we need a word in Turkish for innovation. But in fact, even in English language, people have trouble understanding what is meant by this word innovation. So before we begin, first of all, let's go through a definition of innovation. First of all, innovation is something new. Sounds easy enough. As a verb, innovation is the creation of something new, or the act of creating something new. So innovation can be a noun or a verb. And lastly, innovation is not always something new, but it can be a new way of doing things. What makes an innovation, and what makes a successful innovation, in our experience, is based on three requirements. First of all, innovation is about bringing a new idea to life. What's important there is it's not the idea itself. An idea that's not brought to life is nothing more than a dream. Innovation is about taking those dreams and making them reality. Secondly, an innovation must create new value for the user or the customer of the innovation. It must be providing a new capability, or providing a lower cost, or providing some benefits for the person that uses or buys the innovation. And lastly, it should create value for the seller, for the producer of the innovation. So these are the three requirements. As we talk to senior managers around the world, in all countries, the question comes up, Greg, how can we be better at creating these innovations? And if we learn how to do it, how can we sustain it over time? So that's really the topic of what we're going to cover today. It's important to realize that innovations come in different shapes and sizes. The shapes of innovation you see across the top. The sizes of the innovation you see down the side. Let's talk about the different shapes of innovation. First of all, there's product innovation. And we can all think of many examples of an innovative product, right? There's also service innovation. It's like a product innovation. It's changing the offer. But a bank may think of a service and providing innovative service to you, whereas someone making an electronic product will think of product innovation. The second category is process innovation. How is a process innovation different? Well, a process innovation is about the processes behind the delivery of the product and service. It's often invisible to the end customer, but it will make a difference to the end customer. It will create some value. If we think back to that definition, a good example of process innovation was about 15 or 20 years ago when Dell computers changed their supply chain. There was nothing different about the Dell computer from any other computer. It was a commodity product, but they changed the supply chain to do two things. One is provide a make-to-order, rapid delivery, custom computer to you, the customer. And secondly, they could do it at a lower cost. So it was a process innovation. The computer was the same. The last one is what's called a business model innovation. And that's coming up with a fundamentally new model for your business. A new way of creating value, engaging customers, engaging suppliers. And we'll talk some more in detail. Those are the three shapes of innovation. The sizes of innovation, at the bottom you have an incremental innovation. These could be relatively small changes to your business, to your service, to your products, but important ones. Good companies make lots and lots of incremental innovations on a regular basis. The next step are substantial innovations. Those are larger ones. Those are ones that make a bigger difference. Can sometimes give you real competitive advantage against your competitors, might even provide huge growth in your business. The top one is what's called a breakthrough innovation, and those are innovations that fundamentally change the industry, fundamentally disrupt an industry. So we always like to talk about digital photography as a breakthrough innovation, because it completely changed the film industry by making it obsolete.
Burada inovasyonun zaman içinde değişen, algılanan bir değeri var aslında pazarda. Buna da terminolojide genelde S eğrisi adı veriliyor. Ne yaparsanız yapın, bu eğrinin bir yerinde oluyorsunuz. Hani çok genel anlamda şöyle açıklayabilirim. Pazara yeni bir ürün veya hizmet sunuyorsunuz ve bunun algılanan bir değeri var. Müşteri tarafından takdir edilen bir değeri var. Fakat bir süre sonra müşterileriniz bunu kanıksıyor. Bir yandan da rekabet aynı şeyleri önermeye başlıyor. Siz kendinizi farklılaştırmak için ürününüzü veya hizmetinizi zaman içinde geliştirmek zorunda kalıyorsunuz. Ve kendinizi bu şekilde diğerlerinin arasında farklı bir hale getirmeye çalışıyorsunuz. Ama öyle bir nokta geliyor ki ürününüz veya hizmetiniz bir olgunluk seviyesine erişiyor. Ve artık ürünü daha fazla geliştirerek kendinizi ayrıştırmak mümkün olmuyor. O noktada artık yeni bir eğrinin, yeni bir ürün kategorisinin veya hizmet modelinin üretilmesi zamanı gelmiş demektir. Şimdi bizimle beraber çalışmak isteyen organizasyonların en büyük sıkıntısı genellikle bu eğrinin neresinde oldukları ile ilgili bir farkındalıklarının olmaması. Yani buna aslında iki katmanda bakmak lazım. Bir tanesi organizasyonunuz bir bütün olarak kendi faaliyet alanında bu eğrinin neresinde? İkincisi de yaptığınız işin farklı süreçleri, farklı alanları bu eğrinin neresinde? Ürünleriniz bu eğrinin en başında olabilir. Ama dağıtım kanalı ya da satış kanalı altyapınız bu eğrinin sonunda artık olgunluk seviyesine ulaşmış olabilir. Yani işinizin farklı unsurlarında, farklı alanlarında inovasyon eğrisinin farklı bir noktasında olabilirsiniz. Bu da inovasyon planınızı tamamıyla değiştirecek bir şeydir. Hani bunun için belki daha pratik bir örnek olarak müzik endüstrisinden bahsetmenin yararı olabilir. Son 50-60 yıl içinde müzik endüstrisi çok sayıda S eğrisinden geçti aslında. İşte vinil plakları hatırlayın. Depolamanın ve dinlemenin tek yolu oydu. Zaman içinde bunların kaliteleri artırıldı. Sonra yeni bir S eğrisi devreye girdi. Kasetler çıktı. Değişen müşteri ihtiyaçları ve rekabetin baskısı altında. Daha sonra CD'leri dinlemeye başladık ve diğer iki teknoloji devre dışı kaldı. Bugün artık CD de yok. MP3'ler çıktı. Artık müzik fiziksel bir varlık taşımıyor. Raflarımızda, evlerimizde, arabalarımızda sadece bir ses dosyası. Artık o da muhtemelen S eğrisinin sonuna yaklaşmaya başladı. Çünkü artık MP3 dosyaları da depolamıyoruz. İşte doğrudan müziği dinlemek istediğimiz gereç her neyse ona stream ediyoruz, akıtıyoruz çevrim içi olarak. Greg?
Thank you, Tevfik. So, an interesting thing, as I travel around and talk to companies all over Europe and all over the world actually, one thing I've noticed is that everyone tells me it's hard to innovate. If I visit a small company, they say, Greg, we would love to innovate, but we're just a small company. If we were a bigger company, we'd probably be better. The next day I go to see a big company and they say, we're too big to innovate. We are so bureaucratic and everything takes so long and I don't have control over the resources and I never talk to the customer. If we were a small company, we could probably innovate. Well, guess what? I don't believe the size of your company has anything to do with your ability to innovate. And in fact, we've done some research and we've learned why organizations have difficulty to innovate. Why do they struggle? The reason they have difficulty is the ingrained mindset of how you manage business. What do I mean by this? Well, first of all, if you manage a business, you are focused on your customer. Makes sense. You are focused on the expectations of that customer in terms of the performance of your products and services, and in terms of how they perceive your products and services. You probably even measure this. You send a survey to your customers and say, how did you like my products and services? Tell me the things that are good. Tell me the things we need to improve. So there's almost a closed loop of focus on serving today's customers with today's products and services. Secondly, most organizations are also focused on improving the processes that make all that happen. So 99% of management time is spent fighting fires, solving problems, and making this complex machine run. That's the problem. The problem is, few companies can extend their focus to think about a powerful concept which we call the job to be done. Don't know how well that translates into Turkish, but we'll explain what it means. The job to be done is an expanded focus not only to your current customers, but to your non-customers, to non-consumers, to potential new markets, to understand what they are trying to do. What do they want to do? It's deeply rooted in expected outcomes and the outcome expectations of the customer. I know this sounds all theoretical, so we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into this concept about the job to be done. I'll give you an example. This comes from Professor Theodore Levitt at the Harvard Business School. He made a famous quote, "People don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill, they want to have a quarter-inch hole." I don't want a drill. I want a hole in the wall. Now, today, probably I need to have the drill in order to get the hole. The job to be done is to have the hole in the wall. Or maybe it's not. Maybe the job to be done is to put something in the hole, to hang something on the wall. This kind of thinking would get the drill industry away from trying to make a better drill and instead try to help the user make a hole. Because the job to be done is to have a hole in the wall. Similarly, Henry Ford famously said, if I asked customers what they wanted, they'd tell me they want a faster horse. Why? Because before Ford had the car, people used the horse. So if you were to ask people, I want a horse that's faster, a horse that goes longer, a horse that eats less, etc. No one could dream of the car because they were stuck on the solution. The solution was the horse. The new solution, the innovation, was the car. The job to be done was transportation. So Tevfik, I think you have another example.
Yani Greg'in söylediği gibi aslında müşteriler ürün veya hizmetlerinizi başka bir şey yapmak için geçici olarak kiralıyorlar. Burada job to be done, amaçlanan iş, yapılacak iş denen kavram bu. Örneğin işte bir bardak çayı işte soğuk bir havada kendinizi ısıtmak için kiralamış olabilirsiniz. Veya bir bardak çayı arkadaş sohbetini daha keyifli hale getirmek için kiralamış olabilirsiniz. Veya aynı çayı işte sabaha kadar çalışmanız gereken yorucu bir gece boyunca ayık kalmak için kiralamış olabilirsiniz. Müşterileriniz, müşteri kitleleriniz aynı ürün veya servisi, aynı müşteri farklı zamanlarda farklı amaçlar için talep ediyor olabilir. Şimdi klasik müşteri segmentasyon mantığı genellikle demografikler üzerinedir. İşte yaşlı müşteriler, genç müşteriler, orta yaşlı müşteriler, gelir grubu şunun altında olanlar, üzerinde olanlar, işte ülkenin bu tarafında oturanlar, şu tarafında oturanlar diye. Aslında inovasyonu tetikleyici bakış açısı bu klasik demografik bakış açısından amaçlanan iş bakışına kaymakla başlıyor. Greg?
So again, this is the most powerful concept. If you remember nothing else today, think about job-centric thinking instead of solution-centric thinking. Let's go through some examples of innovation. Some examples of innovation. What's this? Well, I'm barely old enough to remember when this was invented. It's called a clock radio. It's a combination of a clock and a radio. How did they come up with this solution? Did someone sit in a room and think, let's combine a clock with a radio? No. They looked at the user. One of the keys to innovation is user-centric thinking and job-centric thinking. By studying users, it's a technique called ethnography, the clock industry and the radio industry found out that people like to fall asleep to music, and they want the radio to turn itself off, and they like to wake up to music instead of having an alarm bell. By studying actual users, we're trying to create these at home by putting a timer on the clock, on the radio. They came up with the idea to create a new offering, a new solution called a clock radio, but it was driven by the needs of the user. Let's take another example. What are we showing here? It's a nice big American house. What's in front of it is the grass, the lawn. This is an innovation that came out recently in the United States. And it demonstrates very well the flaws of solution-centric thinking and the value of job-centric thinking. The lawnmower industry, they make machines to cut grass, right? Highly competitive business. What are they trying to do? They're trying to make the lawnmower easier to use, create less pollution, use less energy, be easier to push, cost less to buy. So the R&D industry, the R&D engine behind the entire lawnmower industry is about building a better lawnmower. Do you want to have a lawnmower? No, I don't want to cut my grass. What's the job to be done? The job to be done is to have grass that's about this tall, uniformly across the yard. Do I need to have a lawnmower to get that? 10 years ago, yes. Today, no. New innovation is bioengineering of grass seed, that the grass will grow to be this tall and then it stops growing. That's an innovation. They only uncovered this innovation when they realized that people don't want to have lawnmowers. They want to have grass that looks like this. So that's a breakthrough innovation which is disrupting the entire lawnmower industry as we speak. This frame is about a new way of looking at your pictures. It's enabled by technology. The technology is not new. What industry did was understood the user of photos. Well, in the old days you had your photos in a box, in a closet somewhere, or maybe you had them in an album, a book. You had to take time to put them in the book. With digital photography, you have the ability now to display your photos permanently, to shuffle the order of the photos, to have different photos in different rooms. And so the whole presentation of digital photography is a new innovation driven by new needs of the user. It's enabled by the technology, but the solution itself came from a user need. Lastly is something called eBay. I think we all know what eBay is. eBay is a good example of a business model innovation. You think back to the portfolio of innovations with something called a business model. It's a new business model for buying and selling things that you don't want anymore. Very much driven by the user, enabled by the technology, but driven by the user. So in the construction industry, can technology enable new solutions? Yes. Is technology the solution? No. The only way you can find the solution in the construction industry is to understand what are the users and what are the customers trying to achieve, what's really the job to be done, and what are their outcome expectations. We'll talk in a couple moments about the Apple iPod. It's also a very good example in terms of demonstrating innovation. Let's talk for a moment about the myths of innovation. There are three things that people always say to me about innovation, particularly if you casually talk to someone about innovation and the word innovation comes up. They think about famous innovators, right? Think of a famous innovator other than the five that I've shown here. First thing they say, well, innovation is a chaotic activity. It's unstructured. These are the creative types, right? In Silicon Valley, they're throwing balls around in the office and they're wearing crazy clothes and it's chaos. And our company doesn't have that, therefore we can't innovate. That's a myth, by the way. I've seen some very structured banking organizations do some very impressive innovations. So probably you're going to have people tell you we need to be more chaotic and crazy to innovate. It's not necessarily true. The second myth about innovation is that you need to have a genius in your organization, or you need to have a guru, or you need to have some really creative person. There's a myth that Steve Jobs invents all this stuff that Apple puts on the market. It's a myth, by the way. Jobs is just a manager. Everybody can innovate. Innovation is a team activity. And innovation, some of the best ideas come from the most surprising parts of your organization. So it's not just the work by inventors or the gifted few. The third myth is the myth that we have to somehow get a group of people and isolate them so they can innovate. Get them out of the day-to-day business. Where did that myth come from? Well, I think it came from the old slide that I had up here, which talked about the ingrained thinking of running the daily business. And somewhere along the line said, well, if we're going to innovate, we have to separate these people, give them time to think, give them time to be separate. We need to create an incubator for new ideas. That's actually a myth. The best innovations come from people that are talking to customers on a daily basis, people that are running your processes on a daily basis, people that are managing suppliers on a daily basis, people that are running your operations at all levels in the organization. They're they have a wealth of ideas. If you have a way to help them bring those ideas to life, you will successfully innovate.
Evet, yani Greg'in bahsettiği mitler hala bizim de çok yaygın duyduğumuz ifadeler. Hala inovasyonun işte kimsede bulunmayan nadir dehaya sahip bir takım insanların işte inzivaya çekilerek şansın ve biraz da sihirin yardımıyla yaptıkları bir çıktı olduğu düşünülüyor. Aslında bu mitlerin tam tersi de başarılı bir inovasyonun belki kilit girdilerini tarif etmekte faydalı olur. Hani başarılı inovasyon derken burada neyi kastediyoruz? İşte daha hızlı, öngörülebilir, planlı, yapısal ve daha yüksek başarı oranına sahip inovasyon. Bu konuda İnovasyoncunun El Kitabı diye bir yayınımız var. Oldukça uzun yıllar süren bir çalışmanın ürünü. Bu kitapta da bu unsurların tamamı aslında detaylı açıklanıyor. Amazon'dan temin edebilirsiniz. İnovasyon sistematik, yapısal bir süreçtir. Önceden planlanabilir, planlanmalıdır, öngörülebilir, uygulanabilir bir takım adımları vardır. Çeşitli araçlar kullanarak inovatif bir çözüme ulaşmak mümkündür. İnovasyon kim tarafından yapılır? Farklı yetkinliklere, yeteneklere, deneyime sahip, farklı fonksiyonlardan bir araya gelmiş insanların oluşturduğu ekipler tarafından yapılır. Kimdir bu insanlar? İşte Greg'in söylediği gibi günlük operasyonlarınızda çalışan, özellikle müşteriye temas eden, her gün müşteriyle bir ilişki halinde olan satıcılarınız, işte pazarlama ekibiniz, şirketinizin farklı fonksiyonları, yani günlük hayatta sıradan operasyonların içinde çalışan insanlar, inovasyonun kaynağı bunlar aslında.
So, our research revealed that successful innovation occurs by using a repeatable process. And as we talked to many different companies over the years, they all had slightly different processes, and they all used slightly different names. What we developed was the generic model, which is based upon how many other companies are doing innovation. We call this model D4. We found 4 words that begin with the letter D. First thing you notice about this picture is that innovation is a process that is first converging and then diverging and then again converging and finally converging even smaller. So the first thing is the picture looks different from a classical funnel. Most people think it starts big and gets small. That's not how innovation happens. It's this combination of converging and diverging. The second point is that each of these phases brings value and feeds the next phase. I find many companies usually start here because they are solution-centric. They know that they want to build a better lawnmower, and so they start to develop a better lawnmower. But what they fail to realize is the job to be done is to have grass that's this tall. So let's look in more detail. Under each step of the process, there are some sub-steps that have to be done, and there are tools behind it. We don't have enough time today to go into the tools, but the book has 50 tools, and those tools are more or less aligned with the different steps of the innovation process. First step is to create an innovation opportunity, and that's to understand the job to be done. It's to understand where is there an opportunity to innovate. Every business has that opportunity. You probably have more than you can manage. So part of it is about understanding the problem and understanding the scope of the problem and going through a step-by-step process with a team of people to get that well defined. Big failure that many companies do is they jump straight to the solution and they don't spend enough time on the define phase. The define phase is very important. When you finish the define phase, you basically have a good understanding of the problem you want to solve. Nothing more. You also have a estimate of the people, the investment, and the resources you're going to need to solve that problem. And you have a basic setup to manage that. So you end the define phase with some selected opportunities to innovate. Which brings us to the second phase, discover. The discovery phase is probably the most rigorous part of it. Because remember, you've gone from define a very broad down to something narrow. You've identified the problem. Now you have to open it up again and look for lots of possible solutions and look for lots of possible ideas. So these are where lots of tools come in. You might be familiar with some of these tools like ethnography to study how users do things, trees, which is a technique for finding different combinations. You can look at biomimicry to get ideas from nature. That's how Pilkington developed the self-cleaning glass. They copied the lotus leaf. These are ideas. Ideas can come from other industries. As Tefik said, we work in lots of different industries, and typically our clients appreciate going from industry A to industry B to find new ideas. So the steps here are to refine the opportunity, to get a team involved, leveraging the power of many people. Typically these teams will include some of your customers, maybe some of your future customers, maybe some of your suppliers, maybe some of your distributors. You want to search external knowledge bases. There are different types of knowledge bases, and you want to prioritize and select your ideas. So at the end of the discover phase, you have a more or less concept or some multiple concepts selected. So you've discovered how you're going to solve the problem. You've discovered that, hey, we're going to get the grass to stop growing, right? We'll genetically engineer these seeds. The development phase is something you're probably more familiar with. Most companies tell me they're pretty good at product development once they get to the concept. That's in about how you formulate the design, how you select the design, how you optimize the design for the target. And then you come out with what's called a paper prototype. We figured it out. We solved the problem on paper. Now we need to get permission to invest to actually go off and demonstrate our idea. And that's the fourth D. Build a working model, map out the processes that would actually bring this thing to life. Right? We talked about bringing a new idea to life. Optimizing the processes, improving it. Usually the first prototype needs some improvement, and then transitioning it into volume. So again, what we have here is a 4-step process for innovation. And organizations that learn this, or something similar to it, are able to consistently and sustainably innovate. Let's drill down for a moment on this idea of a job to be done. There are many different types of jobs to be done. For example, a very simple one, cleaning your teeth. Most of us clean our teeth in the morning, right? The main job category describes what the customers are doing. They're cleaning their teeth. There are other jobs to be done, though. There are functional jobs, which define exactly what we want to do. It's how we want to clean the teeth. Do we use a brush? Do we use floss? There's different ways to do it. There are also personal jobs. How do you know if the job's done? You feel it. Feels fresh. I think my teeth are clean, right? So you need to have that as an outcome. We talked about outcome expectations. There's social jobs. Well, one reason why I want to clean my teeth is I want to look good up here on stage. I also want to talk closely to you and smell good, right? So there's reasons why. There's a social job to be done. There's also what's called ancillary jobs to be done. These are the jobs that you do related to the main job. In this case, I want to have healthy gums, right? I don't want to get gum disease. Or there's other things I want to do around the cleaning of the teeth. So this whole idea of different types of jobs, good companies have learned to do it. And so if you go shopping for a car, person selling you the car will try to understand what your outcome expectations are and what's the job to be done. Do you want the car because it's fast? Do you want the car because you have kids and different things to take around with the family? Do you have a social need to have a certain kind of car? These are all needs, and they have to be thoroughly understood from the customer base. So let's talk about an example. An example everybody likes to talk about, this is a great innovation of the last 10 years, the iPod from Apple. What's the job to be done? The main job is to listen to music, right? Was this revolutionary? No. We were already listening to our music. What Apple did was they explored the user and they started to understand what's called a job map. A job map is a very powerful concept. It's one of the tools we have in our book. It maps out the steps that you go through when you listen to music. It identifies the ancillary jobs adjacent to listening to music. Other things that you want to do besides just listening to music. So, by understanding the user and becoming user-centric, they can say, well, in addition to listening to music, I first want to be able to buy the music. So this solution should give me a way to buy my music and to listen to music. Before I buy it, I want to hear it. So I want to sample. I want to be able to listen to the music. I want to shop around by listening to music. Well, when I was a teenager, we never had the choice. You would look at the album art and you think that probably looks good, or you'd hear it on the radio. Today, you can sample it. After you listen to it, you might want to describe it. You could say, it's my favorite song, I give it 5 stars. Or I don't like the song, I give it 1 star. Or you may want to describe the genre of music. It's jazz, it's R&B. Or it's music from my university years. So you want to label it. That's my university music, right? Then you want to organize your music. You want to be able to decide how to organize your music and decide, I'm only going to play French music this afternoon. And only my French music will play, but in a random order. You can do that. You can store your music, right? I need to store it, not just on my computer. I don't trust my hard drive. I want to burn some disks. I want to put it up in the cloud. I want to have it on a second iPod in the car. Okay? All these things are part of the job map. Obviously, the newest thing they've come out with is Ping. Ping is a social media within iTunes that lets you discuss music with other music fans. By discussing the music, you can discover new music. So this loop is a job map. And what Apple has successfully done is they've started with a pretty simple job and they've said, well, it's much more than that. It's much more than that. And this can apply to your business as well. Job mapping is hard to do because most companies like to map their own processes. So I was with a client last week and we tried to build a job map of what their customers do and they couldn't do it. They kept building a map of their own processes of what they do. But you need to get on the other side and try to understand the customer. And that's what job mapping is about. So, to summarize, there are 5 key success factors to sustainable innovation. One is you need this job-centric thinking that we talked about. 2 is everyone can participate. It doesn't mean the entire organization gets involved, but it's not just the gurus. It's building teams to work on these problems together. Cross-functional teams, teams that include the customer, teams that include the supplier. Thirdly, you need a structure. You need a process. It's problem solving. You need a method, you need tools, you need templates. A lot of people don't really take this on board. It's something very structured. Fourthly is you need a portfolio of innovations. And earlier on we showed you the different kinds of innovations and the different sizes of innovation. Good companies manage a portfolio of innovations. They don't all succeed. Some will fail. Like any portfolio, you have your winners and your losers. And lastly, probably most importantly, the biggest challenge is to overcome fear. The fear of cannibalization, the fear of failure, or quite simply the fear of change. Let's go through 2 real examples of clients that we've worked with on putting some of these concepts into action. First one is a company called Bechtel. You may have heard of them. They construct huge projects, huge engineering projects, oil refineries and manufacturing plants and huge hotels and things like this. They came to us with a problem. they said that we want to reduce the cost and improve the quality of the way we manage our suppliers. Our supplier management process has paper like this. It's bureaucratic, it's slow, it generates a lot of mistakes. And by the way, we've been trying for years to improve that process using process improvement techniques. We've tried to re-engineer this process several times, but it's still a very big problem for us. What we did was we helped them deploy 5 teams, all working on the same problem. The problem was to rethink the entire supplier management process at Bechtel. The 5 teams applied the D4 process. They went through the steps I showed you. They applied many of the 50 tools. Not all the tools. You don't need all the tools. But they applied enough of them to start to dig under and understand things like unmet hiring criteria, unmet needs, and what would an ideal innovation look like in this process. This is an example of a process innovation. What the teams generated then together, the 5 teams created, some of them were the same ideas, but some had unique ideas and different ideas. We brought the whole thing together, and they actually identified 150 key criteria which are used to hire the suppliers. They came up with 1,400 new ideas which they could classify, categorize, and prioritize, and then they created a multi-generational plan to implement these. They had ideas that they could implement in 6 months, ideas they could implement between 6 months and 1 year, and ideas they implement between 1 year and 5 years. And with that, they created a plan. So far today, they've saved hundreds of millions of dollars by streamlining this process. They've reduced the amount of paperwork in half. They've changed the entire way they contract with their suppliers, the way they manage the supplier homologation, the way that they share data with suppliers, and we could spend an hour just talking about it, but it's a great example of a process innovation. Second example is a service innovation. This one took place in South Africa. There's a company called Vodacom. It's the South African subsidiary of Vodafone, who we probably have all heard of. Vodacom came to us with a problem. They said, we have a business that's mature, it's not growing, and that's the mobile phone services for enterprises. Business is flat. Can you help us grow this business? We want to innovate. Okay? So what we did was, we started by looking at the job to be done of the enterprise mobile phone customer. What is their job to be done? We mapped how they use mobile phones. We helped them to map how they hire a mobile phone supplier. We helped them to map the different outcome expectations, and they were able to apply the D4 methodology in a team to create some new services and some new offerings, to actually put some innovation into their offering. The results are that they gain deep market insight that they never had before. And one of the managers told us, they said, for years we've been doing customer surveys, and we get the data back, and it really didn't give us any insight. In fact, it told us what we already knew, pretty much. The ethnography studies took that one step deeper. We started to dialogue with the customers. They generated over 400 new ideas by working in teams through the D4 process. They prioritized these ideas, and they've started to implement many of them, and already now their business has started to grow. So they've been able to go into a mature business and create growth by looking at unmet user needs and in innovating new services to address those needs. So Tevfik, I'll let you kind of wrap it up.
Thanks, Greg. En çok karşılaştığımız soru, peki bunlar iyi de işte şirketimi, yaptığım işi nasıl daha inovatif, yenilikçi bir şirket haline getiririm? Yani bugün A noktasındayım, B noktasına, daha yenilikçi, inovatif bir şirket olma noktasına varmak istiyorum. Hani özetlemek gerekirse bunun için hani çok detayıyla bahsedemeyeceğiz ama çok genel bir yol haritası verebilirim. her sektör ve iş için gerekli. Önce kurumun nerede olduğunu anlaması lazım. Hem kurum olarak hem de biraz önce S eğrisinden bahsederken anlattığım gibi alt süreçler bazında da bunu yapması lazım. Yani işte şirketimin bilgi ve yetkinlik düzeyi ne seviyede? İşte alt süreçlerim bu eğrinin neresinde? Dağıtım kanalı süreçlerim, tedarik zinciri yönetimim, yeni ürün geliştirme, yeni tasarım yapma süreçlerim bu eğrinin neresinde? Yani mevcut durumum nedir? Altyapılarım neler? Ve daha sonra bir ana plan geliştirmesi lazım kurumun. Ana plan ne demek? Bütün şirket süreçlerinin, İK süreçleri, yeni ürün geliştirme süreçleri, tasarım, hizmet süreçleri hepsinin doğrultusunun inovasyon yönüne çevrilmesi ve bunun stratejinin entegre bir parçası haline getirilmesi. İşte Greg'in de anlattığı gibi bizim burada konuştuğumuz anlamda inovasyon tesadüfen biraz da şansın yardımıyla ortaya çıkmış başarılı bir çıktı değil. Biz bunu sistematik, sürekli öngörülebilir, planlı bir hale getirebilirsek o zaman sürdürülebilir bir rekabet avantajı yaratırız. Nerede durduğumuzun farkına varırsak bu bize geleceğe dair bir plan yapmak için büyük bir avantaj sağlar. Bu da bizim inovasyon programımız demektir. İnovasyon programı ne demek? Şirketinizin, kurumunuzun içinde bir inovasyon süreci oluşturmak demek. İnovasyonu süreçleştirmek demek. Bu süreç biraz önce Greg'in bahsettiği gibi D4 yöntemi olabilir ya da adının ne olduğu önemli değil. Başka bir metod olabilir. Ana bileşenleri değişmez. Pazarı ve yapılacak işi anlamak, alternatifler üretmek, alternatifler arasından seçim yapmak ve müşteri için gerçekten o anda değer yaratan bir çıktı üretebilmek. Bilgi ve yetkinlik bunun çok önemli bir boyutu. Bilgi organizasyonunuzun içindeki bilgi de olabilir. Organizasyonunuzun içinde zannettiğinizden çok fazla bilgi olabilir. Bunu bir araya getirmenin yöntemini kurumun bulması lazım. Bilgi organizasyonun dışında sektörde rekabet ettiğiniz diğer şirketlerde olabilir. Onlardan esinlenebilirsiniz. Bilgi bambaşka bir sektörde olabilir. Onların uygulamalarını kendinize getirebilirsiniz. Ya da bizden sonraki arkadaşlarımın bahsedeceği gibi açık inovasyon gibi heyecan verici yaklaşımlar size bilgiyi sağlayabilir. Ama buna erişmek, bunu yönetmek ve bunu organizasyonel kültürün bir haline getirmek çok önemli. Bu uzun vade sürekliliği sağlayacak bir bileşen. Ve her değişim girişiminde olduğu gibi organizasyonel destek çok önemli. Yani bütün organizasyonun liderlerden başlayarak şu resmi desteklemeleri bunun kilit girdilerinden bir tanesi. İnovasyonun herhalde 3 temel unsuru var diyebiliriz. Bir tanesi burada yazdığı gibi bilgi, üniversitelerle özel sektörün işbirliği. Bunun çok kritik olduğunu düşünüyoruz. İkincisi sermaye. Üçüncüsü de yaratıcı, yetkin, genç nüfus. Türkiye'de bu üçü fazlasıyla var. O yüzden biz Türkiye açısından bakıldığında ülkemiz açısından çok umutluyuz. Türkiye'nin bütün bunları bir araya getirerek, yapısal bir süreç haline getirerek yakın gelecekte çok büyük bir inovatif sıçrama yapacağını ve hep beraber bunun keyifli sonuçlarını göreceğimizi düşünüyoruz. Bizi dinlediğiniz için çok teşekkür ederiz. İyi günler dilerim.